Sahanau bhunaktu saha viryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini. Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Vridaduhe Namaha. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyah Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So welcome everyone, Hari Om, to this session of Bhagavad Gita. We are looking at chapter 2 now, which is Sankhya Yoga. So far, we have seen the Arjuna Vishada Yoga, which continued on to about 10 shlokas in chapter 2. We are now coming to the actual teachings of Bhagwan Shri Krishna to Arjuna. So we saw last time that Arjuna has completely realized that he is helpless and is not able to come to any decision, and he surrenders totally to Lord Krishna. In his own words, he admits that he is thoroughly confused and he has an uncontrollable amount of pity for himself. Of course, Arjuna does not realize that it is not really pity, but it is actually just misplaced compassion. And we see that he's now under heavy mental stress of this extreme confusion. He confesses that his intellect is obstructed by this fog, or this cloud of confusion. And this confusion is about his responsibility, about what is dharma and what is adharma. And for the moment, the problem of whether to fight and conquer the enemies or not to fight and allow the enemies to conquer him is what is running through his big mind. And he needs an urgent solution. And his brain is completely burnt out. So we saw this, and with that, he just submits to Sri Krishna. And when we think about what is dharma, dharma is that which is the essential nature of a thing. In simple ways, we know that a dharma of, say, sugar is to be sweet. A dharma of salt is to be salty. So then what is the dharma of a Manava Purusha? What is it? It is basically to be the ability to be true to his own essential nature, which is godly, which is divine. And therefore, Arjuna was asking Sri Krishna, what is truly my dharma? So you see, it's a very profound question, and it brings to Sri Krishna the need for the highest knowledge to be given to Arjuna. And this is what we saw in the shloka, Karpanya dosho pahata swabhavaha, Prichhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha, Yachreyasya nishchitam bruhi tanme, Shishyasteham shadhimam tvam prapannam. The word Shreyas here indicates not just material prosperity, but as I mentioned earlier, it goes to describe the highest spiritual blossoming of the seeker himself. Another thing to note in this shloka is in his confession, when Arjuna asks Sri Krishna that Shishyaste aham shadimam tvam prapannam, that I am thy disciple. It is important to recognize that this relationship that Arjuna is asking Sri Krishna is a very, very unique relationship where the student has now surrendered with an attitude of total humility, where now the teacher himself, as we saw, Sri Krishna, did not say much about teachings before, but he was waiting for this moment where Arjuna, with his total humility, has surrendered to him, and therefore he has now completely accepted this disciple, and with lots of kindness, love, and affection. Sometimes, as Gurudev would say, more than 1,000 times that even a father would feel for his own son, because Sri Krishna knows that if the student is expected to follow him faithfully, every bit of the instruction that he has to give him, then he has that responsibility to remove all doubts of this student who has now surrendered with full faith. So we will find throughout this Bhagavad Gita a number of different times that Arjuna punctuates Sri Krishna's message with a number of doubts. And we will see that. And as a true teacher, Sri Krishna never grows impatient with him. On the other hand, each question, as it were, it adds more and more enthusiasm from Sri Krishna to Arjuna. And we will see that as we move from one chapter to another. So again, Arjuna continues by saying, Nahi prapashyami mamapu udyat yat chokam shanamindriyanam avapya bhuma vasapatnam riddham rajyam suranam api chadipatyam. You can see that the urgency felt by Arjuna here. It's almost it's a burning aspiration for liberating himself from the limitations of a mere mortal. All that he wants is to make himself perfect with the right discrimination or viveka, which Sri Krishna will be giving to him. So he's asking Krishna with a lot of urgency so that he doesn't go through this agony of mental pain. And then we finally saw the completion where Sanjaya now talks about how that Arjuna, that Gudakeshaha, that master of the sleep, that conqueror of the foes, to that Arjuna, Rishikesham, who is none other than Krishna, addresses him, and you see that Arjuna goes into Tushnim Bhava. tushnim, indicating a total silence, a silence that typically comes to people when they are stunned or something which there is nothing more that they can handle. They've come to the end of the rope, so to speak. And so here you have Sri Krishna addressed as Govinda. Govinda, again, a beautiful name to indicating that the Lord himself is coming to express to Arjuna to remove his Vishada and to give him the knowledge. So we see here Sanjaya, through use of various terms, showing Arjuna that Arjuna has surrendered to Sri Krishna, the Lord of the senses. And he has, of course, surrendered to none other than Govinda himself. And continuing the same shloka here, we see Tamuvacha Rishi Keshaha, Prahasanniva Bharata, Senayor Ubhayor Madhye, Vishi Dantam Idam Vachaha. So we see Sanjaya telling that Lord Krishna gave this message in the battlefield. So when the stunned and this confused ego, which is Arjuna, totally surrenders to Sri Krishna, the Lord smiles and reassures that Jiva, Arjuna, of complete victory. There is no question at all. And this reminds me of the beautiful shloka, which is at the end of the 18th chapter. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Tatra Partho Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. Wherever there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, and wherever there is Partha, there is prosperity, victory, happiness. And thus, this is how Lord Krishna, does this prahasan niva, to say that it is not a problem at all. I will cure you. And we see that this entire next few chapters is nothing but a re-education of Arjuna. And once he has gained this mental poise, he will soon discover that whatever situation he was facing was not a problem, and that he is ready for any challenge. With that, we find that just like Arjuna was put in a particular situation in order to conquer that fundamental disease in him, which is the disease of the ego, the Arjuna disease, so too, something for all of us to ponder upon when we are faced with challenges, to recognize that life puts us in particular situations which are conducive for our growth. At the time that we go through it, it appears that why me? Why am I put in this situation? So many people are happy, they don't have a problem, but why am I put in this problem? So the Senayor Ubhayor Madhye, in between the two armies which Arjuna was put in order to get to this knowledge, but we see that the situation that we are put in may be something totally different. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita, which is given in the middle of these two armies, is something similar to how in the Upanishads, where the knowledge was given in the serene Himalayans, ashrams, and everywhere. And we find that that is, again, in the Upanishads, it may be given that way, but in Bhagavad Gita, because we are dealing with somebody like Arjuna and a war, the same knowledge has been given in the midst of a battlefield. So we see that smilingly, Krishna tells Arjuna this entire teaching. And we saw this we will see this from now on, from the shloka here. In the following 9 to 10 verses, starting from the 11th verse here, Krishna starts his teaching on how we have to be in command of any situation. No situation can overpower us. The situation cannot disturb us at all. Even in the midst of a battlefield, you will see that Sri Krishna gives a chain of arguments. And in this chain of arguments, starting from this 11th, he starts from the highest standpoint. This highest standpoint is the philosophical standpoint. And he says there is absolutely nothing whatsoever to fear. Now, when he gives this message, the student in Arjuna is like, wait a minute. What do you mean by there is nothing to fear? Because you can see that in his mind, he was still very affected. He was very depressed. So intellectually, he was not able to understand this or rationally think this because he was so confused. But then Sri Krishna being Sri Krishna and Arjuna being the best student, Sri Krishna decides that I need to start from the topmost knowledge. Maybe Arjuna might get it right away. Of course, wasn't he an Uttama student, right? So he should be able to get it, right? So he starts off with that. And then when he finds that Arjuna, like all of us, have a lot of questions, then he comes down one more notch down. And then he comes down even further notch. And you will see that as we move through this series of shlokas here, where he starts off in the highest level, and then he goes on to 2 more levels, and then he comes to the level of body, and then he comes down to the level of challenges at the body level. So we will be seeing up to that in today's lecture. So let's chant the shloka. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Ashocyanan Vashocastvam. Ashocyanan Vashocastvam. Prajnavadamscha bhashase. Prajnavadamscha bhashase. Gatasuna gatasumscha. Gatasuna gatasumscha. Nanushocanti panditaha. Nanushocanti panditaha. So Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the blessed Lord said, Ashocyanan Anvashocastvam. For those that should not be grieved for, you have grieved. Prajna Vadamscha Bhashase, yet you speak words of wisdom. Gatasun Agatasun cha, for the dead and for the living. Na anushocanti panditaha, the wise never grieve. So we will see this in detail, a very, very important shloka, this being the first of the teachings of Sri Krishna. So Ashocyan Anvashocastvam, Tvam referring to you, that is referring to Arjuna. Anvashochaha, you have grieved or you are grieving for then Anvashochaha, which is for the ungrievable. You're grieving for those who need not be grieved, and you're grieving for them. But I guess that's okay. But you are talking like a wise man with this. Prajna Vadamscha Bhashase. You're talking like a wise man. But the problem is, you are talking like a wise man, but you're acting like an ignorant person. Isn't that a contradiction, hey Arjuna? So, as you can see, if somebody speaks like a wise person, now Sri Krishna is referring to, all the things that Arjuna had said before about the family situation and about the traditions and so many different things, right? So in all this, Lord Krishna is reminding Arjuna that, hey, you speak like a wise man, but you're acting not like a wise person. You're really a mudaha. You're really ignorant or deluded. Because those who are really wise, they do not grieve over anything. Gata soon and agata sumscha. Agata sumscha meaning that who are living. So gata soon, which is who have already gone, and agata soon, who have not gone. So in both the cases, the wise people don't really grieve. And who are those wise people? The wise people are the panditaha. The panditaha meaning the one who has panda, who has knowledge or wisdom. They are the ones who are called as panditaha. So panditaha is really an exalted title to be given to somebody who's a master. And it's a title which is used, as you know, in many different fields as well. But here it means, panditaha means a pandit who is a master and who's a master of all situations. And so here we have Sri Krishna reminding Arjuna that, hey, you are grieving over people who are, you speak for the, they are gatasun or agatasumsha. The wise will never grieve, but here you are already grieving. Now, what is he really grieving for here? We find that Arjuna, when he talked about Bhishma and Drona, the shloka Katham Bhishma Maham Sankhye, they are the people, Krishna reminds him, that you don't have to grieve for them, because if you're referring to Bhishma Pitamaha or Dronacharya as the physical body, then as far as that is concerned, it is anitya. And we will come to that again in a couple of the shlokas. But if you're grieving for something which is the permanent entity in them, which is Atma, that Atma will never die. So you don't have to grieve for the fact that if you consider them as Atma, or if you don't consider them as Atma, as the body. Therefore, you should not grieve, because if it is the body, we know that nobody is going to be here forever. So then why are you grieving? This body is subject to death, and it has to go one of these days. So then you don't have to worry about that. So whether it is the body, which is anatma, or whether it is atma, you don't have to worry about it. So then Arjuna must be thinking, okay, I see your point, but what if I consider them as a jiva? Are they not subject to death? So, because he must have heard in Garuda Purana and everything about how this jiva goes through so much of suffering and everything. So he's worried about what happens then. So then Sri Krishna is trying to tell him that you don't have to worry about Bhishma and Drona in that case also, because they will go to heaven. They are noble people. And not only that, they are dying in the battlefield and they're doing the dharma. So you don't have to worry about it. So Arjuna must have thought, okay, if it is not Bhishma and Drona, then what about all my cousins, all the people that I look up to? What about them? So it is said in the Shastras that if somebody dies while doing their duty, their kartavya karma, they automatically go to heaven. So then you don't have to worry about them. But then I'm sure Arjuna must have asked the question, what about all those people who are not so good people? What about them? Well, Sri Krishna must be reminding him, saying that even then you don't have to worry about it, because hell is nothing like, it's just like a washing machine. You know, just like when you put your clothes in the washing machine, it is cleaned properly, and then after that, it is sent back. So too, in the hell, people are, they go serve their time, they are cleaned properly, they're ironed and everything, and then they're sent back. So you don't have to worry about it. So it is said in Mahabharata, for example, that Karna actually met Bhishma Pitamaha and in heaven, and Karna knew he was doing wrong by supporting Duryodhana, but according to him, he wanted to die in the battlefield so that he can actually go to heaven. So Krishna is trying to remind Arjuna that he doesn't have to worry about all these people. So in that sense, he's grieving for people who are, who will, even if they die, he doesn't have to worry about it. So, and then if you remember, Arjuna was worried about the fact that the war was going to cause so much amount of destruction. So Krishna is trying to remind him even there that, Arjuna, again, that is not your duty about taking care of people. I'm there. I will take care of it. If you think that you are the one who's killing them, well, that is only your ego. That is only your sense of doership. So you don't have to worry about it. So you just don't think about it at all. And just a small joke about here, about why we should not grieve over living people too. So we tend to get worried about even people who are living. So there was once a lady who was so worried about her husband, and so her friend asked her, she was worried about her husband, what would he do about, how is he going to go to heaven when he dies? And so her friend said, what is your problem? Why are you worrying? She said, I'm really worried how he's going to heaven, because he gets lost even within a few miles of his house. So how is he ever going to really go to heaven? I'm really worried about it. So you see, people get worried about so many different things. They worry about their relationships, they worry about their wealth, they worry about their health, their power, positions, so many things. And Sri Krishna is as using Arjuna as a nimitta, is trying to tell us that at the end of the day, there is no need to worry about anything, whether it's people who are already dead or who are going to die, or people who are living in this world. So what does this shloka really mean to us? As I mentioned, one aspect about it is that so many things can happen, which we will talk about in different shlokas here. But as far as this shloka is concerned, we worry about a lot of things and about our security and things like that. For example, even as we earn well and we buy a nice house, we tend to put a lot of security in the house in order to secure the house. Why do we do that? Well, because we are always worried that something may happen. This house may also get robbed or anything. How about when we invest in a stock market? We know there is a possibility of money going up or down, but yet we get worried about this. So gata soon, agata soonscha, all those areas where things may go, things may come, the idea is to retain a balance. So there is this thing about Edison. When Edison, this great scientist who had done so many discoveries, once his garage got fire, and even as it caught fire, you have to see the ecstasy with which he called his wife and he said, "Come, come, come, see this fire." Anybody else would have thought, "Oh my goodness, all my years and years of work has gone to dust here." But Edison, true to his nature, he did not worry at all, and he was just so happy celebrating this event. So another aspect of the shloka is some panditaha na shochanti. Now, somebody may say, what does that mean? Does that mean that great people don't cry at all? They are stoic, and they are just so, they're not untouched. But that's not true. Even great people, we know Sri Rama, for example, cried when his father cried. And all great people, whoever, they do show the emotion, which is an emotion of love and reverence for the departed. But this word panditaha na anushochanti, that needs to be understood in the context of the shloka, where Sri Krishna is trying to remind that anushochanti, panditaha na anushochanti, indicating that they do not hold on to their grief for too long. Anushochanti, which is referring to as something which happens continuously, anu. So indicating that such people, they don't hold on to their grief for too long. So therefore, we find that in this shloka, Sri Krishna is trying to address one aspect of why we should, in such a huge things which can be a great calamity occasions, how with his arguments of making sure that we understand this aspect of what is dying and what is not dying. Now moving on to the next shloka. So Arjuna probably must have said, well, you're asking me not to worry about or weep for those who have gone and for those who are not gone. So, and it is from the standpoint of the highest reality, right? Which is this touch of, you may say, the life in us. From that standpoint, we see that Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that, we don't have, that he shouldn't cry. So at this point, it is also, you can look at it as just like how in an ocean, you have waves which come up and waves which come down. So they come and they die. So too we have different souls going through different bodies. They come, they go, and that continues on. And so in the next shloka, we see that Sri Krishna is now trying to remind Arjuna about, let's chant the shloka here. Natve vaham jatu nasam, natve vaham jatu nasam, natvam ne me janadhipaha, natvam ne me janadhipaha, nachaiva na bhavishyamaha, nachaiva na bhavishyamaha, sarve vayamatah param, sarve vayamatah param. So natu eva aham jatu na asam. Not at any time in the past, indeed was I not. Natvam na ime janadipaha, nor you, nor these rulers of men. Nacha eva na bhavishyamaha, and nor ever shall we cease to be. Sarve vayam athaf param. Every one of us from this point on forwards. I just read the English meaning here, but again, we're going to break it down because Arjuna must have asked, so, okay, I understand about people, that, come and go, but what about me? What about was I there in the past? And what about all these people? How can you explain this? So that is why Sri Krishna is saying, Natu eva jatu na asam, Natu eva jatu, indicating that there was never a time, na aham, na asam. I was not there. So there's no reason for grieving at all, indicating that the only one thing which has been constant is this aspect of the Atma. The Atma is the only one which is Nitya, na eva, never, Jatu, there never was a time, na eva asam, that I was not there. What does that mean? Arjuna is thinking. So Sri Krishna is trying to say that means that I was always there. So then Arjuna must have definitely asked Bhagwan, okay, Bhagwan, but I was not talking about you. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about all these people. So Bhagwan must have said, why don't you listen to me completely, Arjuna? Natvam, nor you. That means there was never a time when you were also not there. Na ime janadipaha, and there was never a time when I was also not there, you were not there, and all these kings were not there. That means I was there always, you were there always, and all these kings were also there at just like at this present time, but also in the past, and they will continue to be there in the future also. So that being the case, why are you again worried? So we were there, we are all Nitya Vastu, right? So Arjuna must have thought, what about this person who is always giving me trouble? What about him? You mean to say he will also not go away? So Sri Krishna is trying to say, well, if that is your prarabdha, you will face him. So from the standpoint of this body was not there earlier, and it will not be there in the future. So this talk is not really from the body standpoint. It is basically from the standpoint of Atma. From the standpoint of Atma, we were always there. And that you don't have to worry. So that is the aspect of, so Bhagwan is taking this, trying to give him a little bit of solace to say that this Atma never dies. So that Atma was there always and never was there at any time that we were not there. So, and it's only the soul which goes from body to another, but the Atma remains the same all the time. So, and let's move on to the next shloka from here. And now we see where Sri Krishna is trying to understand, make Arjuna understand from the aspect of what is this, with the Sukshma Sharira, which we will come to, or the soul in this case, as he is referred to here, and about what happens to that soul as it goes from one body to another. Dehinosmin yatha dehe, Dehinosmin yatha dehe, Kaumaram yauvanam jara, Kaumaram yauvanam jara, Tatha dehantara praptihi, Tatha dehantara praptihi, Dhirastatra na muhyati, Dhirastatra na muhyati. So, Dehina asmin yatha dehi. So just as in this body, Dehinaha, Yatha Dehi, this soul, it goes through Kaumaram, Yauvanam, and Jara. It passes through childhood, youth, and old age. So too, Tatha Dehantara Praptihi, so too it passes on to another body. But Dhiraha, Dhiraha indicating the wise people, just like Panditaham, Tatra na muhyati. Dhiraha Tatra na muhyati. So two things are pointed out here. One is that this Atma, which is a Nitya Vastu or eternal, how it is without any mutations or modifications. And also what Sri Krishna is trying to point out is it is this body that passes or the soul that goes through the childhood, youth, and old age, and then it continues on to another body. But in all this, a wise man, which is Dhiraha, he does not really he does not really cry, and he does not really grieve for the whole thing. So we find that I have another slide here which will show you this beautifully. We see that we go through the various bodies all the way from childhood to youth to young adult to a mature adult and to a senior citizen, right? So this individual in this body, the soul, or if you could Sukshma Sharira, we'll come to it later as we go through more technicalities here. But this individual in the body, it is the mind and the intellect, which is the individuality, who is temporarily at this moment is present in this body as where he is taking the body as maybe as renting the body. You can look at it that way. The person is renting the body and he occupies the body for a short while. And even as he's occupying this body, imagine that he's occupying through the various kind of bodies in one lifetime, which is going through his child, through the youth, and then to the Kaumaram, which is referring to when he was a child, to Yauvanam, which is to a youth, to a young adult, and finally as he matures to an old age. So we go through all these various stages of life. But in all these stages, we find that even though the body goes through different changes, the soul or the Sukshma Sharira, which is in the body, it doesn't change. So the I remains the same through all this, in all these conditions. And as the person goes through this, you see that basically is once the desires are fulfilled in that body, the physical body then falls off and the person then continues in the journey to the next one. So dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptihi dhiras tatranam muhyati. So the person recognizes, so a wise person, dhiraha, he doesn't grieve, na muhyati. He doesn't grieve about the journey that goes through. It's only the ignorant person who feels that, who identifies with his body, thinks that he's going through all these stages. So you can see that Arjuna must be still thinking, okay, if that is the case, there must be some cause for sorrow for ordinary people. Nobody can be really without any sorrow. We see so many changes that's happening. How is that possible that people don't really go through sorrow at all? And and now we have another beautiful shloka, which, as Sri Krishna is trying to answer Arjuna's questions, he's now coming down one more notch lower and trying to explain from the level of the body as to why Arjuna should not grieve with reference to the body itself. So let me chant the shloka. Matra sparshastu kaunteya. Matra sparshastu kaunteya. Shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha. Shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha. Agama payino nityaha. Agama payino nityaha. Tam stitikshasva bharata. Tam stitikshasva bharata. So the shloka says, or Sri Krishna here tells Arjuna that even if you think you're the body, now let us see how it is, how even that you shouldn't worry about it here, which is, it's only the contact of the senses with the objects, O son of Kunti, Kaunteya, it produces Shitaha, Ushnaha, Shitaha cold or Ushnaha heat, Sukha Dukkhadi, which is pleasure and pain. And it is Agama Payinaha. Agama, they have a beginning, and Apayinaha, which is an end. And they are Anityaha, they are impermanent. So, O Bharata, please, Tam Titikshasva, endure them. Titiksha, which is endurance, a beautiful quality of sadhana chatushtaya here. So he tells, endure them bravely, O descendant of Bharata. So the matra sparsha, matra here indicates the sense organs. And matra is actually in Sanskrit also indicating a measure, indicating a way of knowing or measuring the changes what the sense organs go through as they contact the objects themselves. So what do the sense objects do? Basically, they are the ones which brings all this knowledge back. Like, for example, the eyes sees, the ears hear, the nose smell, the skin or the tongue touches. So in a sense, it's only by the use of the sense organs that we come in contact, and that way the body goes through all these experiences. So even then, Sri Krishna is trying to remind Arjuna that there is no, it is cause for any delusion, because that is what they are meant for. So, and we know that even if somebody doesn't like a weather, if you wait for there's a saying that if you wait just for 2 hours, things will change, right? So all this we know goes up and down. So when some things are not permanent, what is the use of really worrying about some things like this? So in that sense, to maintain that equipoise and the balance, and understand that these are all nothing but impermanent. And here we see Sri Krishna addressing Arjuna as Kaunteya, as the son of Kunti Mata, who was known for endurance. So he's trying to use a nice word for Arjuna to indicate, to remind him about how the value of titiksha itself. They're all nothing but, they come and go, so he doesn't have to worry about it. And so another, just a beautiful way of looking at this is not to be like a log of wood floating in the water, and to keep the balance. So a log of wood, for example, it, as the waves come up and down, you see that it is floating, and it's never really steady up in the water itself. Instead, let's try to be a lighthouse firmly standing in the water, And because we see that the lighthouse sits firmly in the rocks, even as the waves lashes, the lighthouse remains firm. So this shloka prompted me to just look at it as, in Gurudev's words, may we learn to live like a lighthouse in the world of change and learn to keep the balance by building our life on firm foundations. So in this last 4 shlokas, now we see how Sri Krishna has imparted the teachings to Arjuna from the very highest level of indicating first as to why Arjuna shouldn't grieve, because anyway the Atma never is eternal. It remains on, and for that reason he shouldn't grieve. And then at the level of the body also, there is no reason to grieve, because anyway that is anitya. And then we saw also the various shlokas about dehinosmin yatha dehe, and then now with matra sparshastu kaunteya, with telling Arjuna about how not to be disturbed by anything, because they're all temporary. And in the next week, we'll look at a few more shlokas addressing on the same. Sri Krishna gives him arguments one after the other to address the other doubts that Arjuna had when he brought his shlokas connected with the grief, which we saw in chapter 1. So with that, we will stop here. And I hope this sparked some questions in your mind or some thoughts on what does this mean to me. And next week, before we start going to the next few shlokas, I'm going to bring in a few questions regarding these, which will spark some real life situations in our own minds on how this can remind us about either the temporariness of life or the impermanency, and how we tend to blow it up sometimes and look at it from how does it affect me? So from that point, we'll have a little bit of discussion and we'll think about more on these concepts. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you, Hari Om.
Thank you, Hari Om. Thank you so much. Nice explanation. Yeah,
Sorry,
nice.
I forgot to ask if anybody had any questions or if anybody wanted to put in.
Thank you, Sunitha.
You're welcome. Hari Om.
Thank you, Sunitha.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari Om.
Thank you, Sunitha ji. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you, Sunitha ji.
Hari Om.
Thank you.